Do you honestly believe anyone in this room values your contribution? Mississippi Richard Ashford's voice, honed to a razor's edge, sliced through the tense silence of the boardroom. His ice-gray eyes, like chips of glacial stone, pinned me in place, radiating an arctic disdain that threatened to freeze me solid. Remind me again, what was that forgettable name? The heat blooming on my face felt akin to being branded. My stomach performed a complicated series of knots, constricting my breath. The carefully rehearsed words I'd planned to speak seemed to dissolve in my throat, choked by a wave of mortification. This was day 1, hour 1, of my tenure as executive assistant at Ashford Industries, and I was already praying for divine intervention in the form of a conveniently located sinkhole beneath the expensive Italian marble. Around the mahogany table, the assembled executives averted their gazes, a few flashing me sympathetic, though fleetingly brief, looks. Others wore that distinctly unsettling gleam of self-preservation, silently thanking their lucky stars that they weren't the target of this particular verbal assault. Now, standing before Richard Ashford, the self-proclaimed business genius I was more inclined to classify as an Armani-clad tyrant, I was faced with a split-second decision that felt monumentally important. I could bow my head, mumble a groveling apology, and join the ranks of the yes-men who orbited him like dutiful moons. Or I could channel my grandmother's unwavering advice. Look the devil square in the eye, and don't you dare blink. My name is Jade Sullivan, Mr. Ashford, I managed, my voice sounding surprisingly steady despite the internal seismic activity. And with all due respect, you hired me precisely to offer my opinions. The line between mediocrity and excellence often lies in the details that no one else has the courage to address. The silence that descended was so thick, so heavy, it felt like a tangible presence, pressing down on us all. Could have been sculpted into a statue. Richard Ashford leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished surface of the mahogany table. A dangerous, predatory smile slowly stretched across his lips, transforming his features. Interesting, he murmured, the word a silken threat. The tone sent a primal jolt of fear through me. I suddenly felt like a gazelle who had inadvertently wandered into a lion's den. Very interesting. Everyone dismissed, he commanded, his gaze never leaving mine. Except you, Miss Sullivan. You stay. The executives rose in a synchronized ballet of relief and escape, chairs scraping softly against the marble floor. Patricia, the HR manager who had hired me, offered a fleeting, almost pitying glance. It was nice knowing you, look, before she slipped out, closing the heavy door behind her with a soft click that echoed like the ceiling of a tomb. I was alone with him, the richest man in New York, the formidable 35-year-old businessman who had forged an empire from nothing, a man described in magazine articles as having a heart of stone and a Midas touch. His tailored jacket stretched taut across broad shoulders, his raven hair slicked back with enough product to withstand a hurricane. And those eyes, God, those eyes seemed to possess the unnerving ability to dissect my carefully constructed defenses, stripping me bare. Sit down, he ordered, not invited, the command laced with an expectation of instant obedience. I complied, settling back into the unforgiving leather of the chair, but kept my back ramrod straight, my chin held high. I might be inwardly dissolving into a puddle of fear, but my mother hadn't raised a coward. Do you have any idea? He began, drumming his fingers against the table in an irritatingly hypnotic rhythm. How many people in this company would unquestioningly do anything I asked? How many would swear that the sky was green if I decreed it so? All of them, I ventured, and he let out a sound that was almost, but not quite a laugh. Almost. Smart. I see Patricia didn't completely screw up this time. He rose from his chair with controlled grace and circled the desk, leaning against the edge directly in front of me, invading my personal space. But smartness without loyalty is ultimately useless. So tell me, Jade Sullivan, why should I trust you? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the ultimate test. I could feel it in my bones. Because, I answered, forcing myself to meet those intimidating eyes. You don't need another puppet. You need someone who will stop you from making mistakes that could cost you millions. And I need this job more than I need to protect your ego." For one eternal, agonizing moment, he didn't react. His expression remained an unreadable mask. Then, finally, he straightened and returned to his imposing leather chair. "Monday, 7 in the morning. My office. Don't be late, Miss Sullivan." He swiveled back to his computer screen, dismissing me with studied indifference. "And Jade?" I paused at the door, looking back. That observation about the Peterson contract. It was correct. But next time, present your opinions in private. Don't make me look like an idiot in front of the board. A tiny, involuntary smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "Yes, sir." When I finally exited that office, my legs were trembling so violently that I had to lean against the cool surface of the corridor wall for support. I had survived. But as I pressed my new employee badge against my chest, a chilling realization settled in my mind. This job wasn't just a career opportunity. It was a battlefield. And I had just declared war on the most formidable man in Manhattan. Monday morning arrived with all the anticipation of a death sentence I'd spent the entire weekend dreading. I found myself standing outside Richard Ashford's office at precisely 6:47 a.m., clutching a leather portfolio that had devoured half my first paycheck. I was wearing the most professional outfit I owned. A charcoal gray pencil skirt paired with a cream silk blouse. An ensemble I desperately hoped screamed, "competent assistant," rather than terrified imposter. The lukewarm coffee from the lobby cafe had gone cold in my trembling hands, and I'd mentally rehearsed at least 15 different greetings, each one sounding more ridiculous than the last. The door swung inward at precisely 7 a.m., and Richard stood framed in the doorway, dressed in running clothes, a white t-shirt that clung to a torso that made it abundantly clear he didn't spend all his time chained to a desk. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and for one mortifying moment, I completely blanked on how to form coherent sentences. "You're early," he observed, his tone not particularly pleased. "Good. I hate people who think on time means exactly on time." He stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Come in." His office was enormous, a monument to corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my compact car, and absolutely no personal touches whatsoever. No family photos, no awards on display, nothing to suggest that a human being actually occupied the space. It was as cold and impersonal as the man himself. "Coffee's in the corner. Make yourself useful while I shower," he directed, gesturing toward a door that presumably led to a private bathroom. "And there's a briefing document on my desk. I expect you to have memorized it by the time I'm back." He disappeared before I could formulate a response, leaving me alone in the sterile temple of corporate intimidation. The document was 47 pages long. 47 pages of dense financial projections, arcane merger details, and what appeared to be a hostile takeover bid for a tech company called Novate Solutions. I speed-read as if my life depended on it, making mental notes of key figures, potential obstacles, and then, on page 32, a glaring error in the projected ROI calculation that could potentially cost the company millions. When Richard emerged 15 minutes later, transformed into an immaculate navy suit that likely cost more than my monthly rent, I was ready. "So," he said, settling behind his imposing desk, fixing those penetrating gray eyes on me. "Impress me." I took a steadying breath and dove in. Novate Solutions has an annual revenue of $847 million, but their last 2 quarters show a 23% decline in their core market. You're offering $2.3 billion, which is generous, considering their inherent instability. The merger makes strategic sense. Their AI patents perfectly complement your existing tech division. But, his eyebrow arched, a silent warning. But, there's a calculation error on page 32. The projected ROI doesn't account for the integration costs you've listed on page 15. You're looking at roughly $340 million less in returns over the first 3 years than this document claims. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope, taut and precarious. Richard's expression was unreadable, carved from granite. Then, with a sudden, decisive movement. He reached for his phone and pressed a speed dial button. "Marcus, get in here. Now." 2 minutes later, a nervous-looking man in his late 50s scurried into the office. Marcus Chun, according to the nameplate I'd spotted in the hallway, CFO of Ashford Industries. "Marcus." Richard's voice was dangerously soft, a prelude to the storm. "Would you care to explain why my brand new assistant found a $340 million error in your projections within 20 minutes, when your entire team has been working on this for 3 months? Marcus's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. He stammered, flipped through papers, and I actually felt a pang of something akin to sympathy for him. Almost. "Mr. Ashford, I'll have my team review." "Your team is incompetent." Richard cut him off with surgical precision. "Fix it by noon, or start looking for new employment." Dismissed. Marcus practically fled from the office, and I was left wondering if I had just made my first enemy, or inadvertently saved the company from a catastrophic blunder. "Don't look so pleased with yourself," Richard said, though there was something subtly different in his tone now. "Respect, perhaps? Maybe. You did your job. That's the minimum expectation, not cause for celebration." I started to protest, but he was already moving on. "We have a meeting with the Novatech board on Thursday. You'll accompany me. Wednesday, we're having dinner with Senator Morrison. He's been blocking some legislation we need. And every morning this week, you're here at 6:45 a.m. I run 5 miles before work. You'll join me." "Excuse me?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "Running. You have a problem with physical fitness, Miss Sullivan?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. "No, Good. Wear appropriate clothes tomorrow. We leave at 6 a.m. sharp." He swiveled back to his computer screen, dismissing me once again. "And Jade, that error you found, it's the only reason you still have a job after questioning me in that boardroom. Don't waste your second chance." I left his office with my head spinning. As I settled into my new desk, strategically positioned right outside his door, a location that allowed him to summon me at will, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. *, watch your back. Richard Ashford destroys everyone who gets too close. A friend. My blood ran cold. I glanced at Richard's closed door, then back at the cryptic message. What had I gotten myself into? The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls, scheduling conflicts, and suspicious glares from other employees who clearly resented my sudden proximity to the king. By 7 p.m., when Richard finally released me, my feet were screaming in protest, and my brain felt like scrambled eggs. "Miss Sullivan." His voice stopped me at the door. I turned back, exhausted. "Yes, you did well today." The words sounded like they caused him actual physical pain to utter. "Keep it up." It wasn't much. It might even be considered insulting by normal standards, but coming from Richard Ashford, it felt like winning the lottery. I practically floated to the elevator on a cloud of exhausted triumph, completely unaware that in his office, Richard was staring at the door I had just exited through, a small frown creasing his forehead. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, the same word he'd used about me on Friday. But this time, there was something else in his tone, something that sounded almost like curiosity. I hadn't run since high school PE class, and that was becoming painfully, agonizingly obvious as I stumbled through Central Park at 6:07 a.m., trying desperately to keep pace with Richard's punishing stride. "Is this your idea of torture?" I gasped between ragged breaths, my lungs burning as if I'd inhaled liquid fire. The morning air was crisp and cold, and I was already regretting the leggings and tank top I'd thrown on in my pre-dawn panic. Richard glanced back at me, not even slightly winded, his expression hovering somewhere between amused and annoyed. "This is my idea of clearing my head before dealing with incompetent people all day. If you can't keep up, go back." The challenge in his voice ignited something stubborn within me, the same defiance that had prompted me to speak up in that boardroom. I pushed harder, forcing my protesting legs to move faster, ignoring the desperate pleas of every muscle in my body. "I can keep up," I lied through gritted teeth. We ran in silence for another mile, and I was seriously contemplating whether death by exhaustion might actually be preferable to this excruciating humiliation, when Richard abruptly stopped at a fountain, barely breaking a sweat while I collapsed onto a nearby bench, gulping air like a drowning victim. "You're out of shape," he observed with his characteristic bluntness, taking a long swig from his water bottle. "Thank you for that astute observation," I managed between gasps. "Did they teach you that at Harvard Business School?" Something flickered across his face, surprise. Perhaps, maybe even the ghost of a smile. "Actually, I dropped out of community college. Built my first company from my studio apartment with $500 and a laptop." I stared up at him, genuinely shocked. This titan of industry, this man who commanded rooms full of Ivy League executives, was a college dropout? "Close your mouth, Miss Sullivan. You'll catch flies." He settled onto the opposite end of the bench, finally showing some slight signs of exertion as he wiped his forehead with a small towel. "Let me guess. You assumed I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, went to Princeton, and had everything handed to me on a platter." "I didn't assume anything," I lied, because that was exactly what I'd assumed. "Liar." He turned those penetrating gray eyes on me, and I felt like a bug pinned beneath a microscope. "Everyone assumes. It's easier than accepting that someone might have actually worked for what they have." There was something raw in his voice, a crack in the carefully constructed armor I hadn't expected to find. For just a moment, Richard Ashford wasn't the ruthless millionaire everyone feared. He was simply a man who had fought his way up from nothing and was tired of being judged for it. "My father was a janitor," I blurted out, surprising myself. "He cleaned offices in buildings like yours. Died of a heart attack when I was 16, working a double shift because we needed the money. So no, I don't think you had it easy. I know what it takes to claw your way up." The silence that followed was different from his usual dismissive quiet. This one felt loaded, significant. "Is that why you took this job?" he asked quietly. "To prove something to your dead father?" The question was like a slap in the face, mostly because it was uncomfortably close to the truth. "I took this job because it pays well and looks good on a resume." Another lie. He stood up, stretching his arms above his head. "But I'll let it slide. Come on. We have 3 more miles. 3 more miles. I practically shrieked. "Are you trying to kill me?" "If I wanted you dead, Miss Sullivan, there are far more efficient methods." He started jogging backward, that infuriating almost smile playing on his lips again. "Consider this character building. Besides, Thursday's meeting with Novatech will feel like a vacation compared to this." I forced myself to stand on wobbling legs and follow him, cursing under my breath with every step. The rest of the week unfolded like a masterclass in survival. The Novatech meeting on Thursday was a bloodbath. Richard dismantled their negotiating position with surgical precision, and I took notes so fast my hand cramped. The CEO of Novatech, a silver-haired man named Robert Crane, kept shooting me curious glances, probably wondering how someone like me had ended up in Richard Ashford's inner circle. "Your assistant is quite attentive," Crane commented during a break, his tone suggesting he meant something else entirely. Richard's response was ice cold. "Miss Sullivan is here because she's competent, not decorative. Focus on the deal, Robert, or I'll find someone else to buy your failing company." I should have felt grateful for the defense, but something about the way Richard had said "not decorative" stung more than it should have. Wednesday's dinner with Senator Morrison was even worse. The senator arrived with his wife, an elegant woman dripping in diamonds, who looked at me like I was something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. Richard was charm personified, funny, engaging, nothing like the tyrant I'd come to know. It was a performance, and he was brilliant at it. "And who is this lovely young woman?" Mrs. Morrison asked with saccharine sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "My assistant, Jade Sullivan," Richard replied smoothly. "Best hire I've made in years." The praise should have warmed me, but I caught the senator exchanging a knowing glance with his wife, and I realized with a wave of hot shame what they were thinking. That I wasn't really his assistant, that I was something else entirely. After they left, Richard turned to me in the private dining room. "You're angry." "I'm fine," I snapped, gathering my things. "Don't lie to me." You've been radiating hostility for the past hour. He loosened his tie, and I tried very hard not to notice how the gesture made him look less like a businessman and more like something dangerously untamed. What did I do now? They think I'm sleeping with you. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Did you see how they looked at me? Like I'm some kind of gold digger? Trophy mistress, he supplied helpfully. Yes, all of those. I'm pacing now, too angry to care about maintaining a veneer of professionalism. And you just let them think it. And what exactly should I have done? Richard's voice rose to match mine. Announce that you're not warming my bed? That would have made it so much better. You could have defended my reputation. I defended your competence. That's worth more than your reputation in this world. He stepped closer, and suddenly the room felt too small, the air too thick. You want to know the truth, Jade? People will always assume the worst. You're young, you're beautiful, and you work closely with me. No amount of denial will change their small minds. The word beautiful hung in the air between us like a live grenade. You think I'm beautiful? The question came out as a whisper. Richard's jaw tightened, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely flustered. I think you're competent. That's all that matters. But the way he was looking at me right now suggested that wasn't all that mattered. Not even close. Mr. Ashford, go home, Jade. His voice was rough, strained. It's late. I'll see you tomorrow morning. 6:45 a.m. I fled the restaurant as if it were on fire, my heart pounding for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with cardio. That night, I lay awake in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Richard Ashford had called me beautiful. Richard Ashford, who treated emotions like weaknesses and people like chess pieces, had looked at me like... My phone buzzed with another anonymous text. Asterisk, he's getting too close to you. That's when he's most dangerous. End this before he destroys you like he's destroyed everyone else. I should be scared. I should listen to whoever was sending these ominous warnings. But all I could think about was the way Richard had said my name. Not Miss Sullivan, not his assistant, just Jade. The breaking point came on a rainy Friday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks into my employment at Ashford Industries. I was in Richard's office, organizing files for an upcoming audit, when I accidentally knocked over a stack of folders on the credenza behind his desk. Papers scattered everywhere. And as I scrambled to pick them up, one photograph slipped out from between the documents. A picture so unexpected, so profoundly out of place, that I froze with it in my hands. It was Richard, maybe 10 years younger, with his arm wrapped around a stunning blonde woman. But what truly captured my attention was his smile. Genuine, unguarded, nothing like the cold masks he wore now. He looked happy, human. What the hell do you think you're doing? I spun around to find Richard standing in the doorway, and the expression on his face when he saw what I was holding made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous, raw, unfiltered pain. I'm sorry. I knocked over the files and I started to explain, but he crossed the room in 3 long strides and snatched the photograph from my trembling hands. You have absolutely no right to touch my personal belongings. His voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it even more terrifying than if he'd yelled. I didn't mean to pry. I was just... Get out, Richard. I said get out. The roar echoed through the office, and I saw heads turning outside the glass walls. His face had gone white, his knuckles clutching the photograph so tightly they had turned bloodless. I grabbed my tablet and fled, my cheeks burning with humiliation as I passed curious coworkers who had witnessed my public dismissal. I barely made it to the bathroom before the tears started, locking myself in a stall and pressing my palms against my burning eyes. This job was supposed to be my big break. Instead, here I was, crying in a corporate bathroom after being verbally eviscerated by a man whose depths I was only beginning to glimpse. I was just about to pull myself together when I heard voices. 2 women entering the bathroom, their heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Did you see Ashford lose it on his new assistant? The first voice belonged to someone I recognized, Vanessa Drake, the VP of Marketing, whose barely disguised contempt for me had been palpable since day one. "About time," another woman responded. "She's been getting way too comfortable. Did you know she actually corrects him in meetings? The audacity. Well, she won't last much longer. None of them do once they discover the truth about Elena." My breath caught in my throat. Elena, the woman in the photograph. God, that was such a tragedy. Vanessa continued, her voice laced with a morbid fascination. "To lose your fiancé like that right before the wedding. No wonder he's so cold now. I heard he was the one driving when the accident happened. Can you imagine living with that guilt?" Their voices faded as they left, and I sat frozen in the stall, the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving clicking into place with brutal clarity. Richard's coldness, his emotional walls, his inability to let anyone get close. He wasn't cruel, he was broken. When I finally emerged from the stall, my reflection in the mirror revealed mascara streaks and red, swollen eyes. I washed my face, squared my shoulders, and made a decision that was probably incredibly stupid. I was going back to that office. Richard was standing at his window when I walked back in, his back to me, the photograph still clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my presence, but his shoulders tensed. "I told you to leave," he said to the glass. "You tell a lot of people to leave. I'm getting the distinct impression you don't actually want them to listen." I closed the door quietly behind me, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who was she? None of your business. You're right, it's not. I moved closer carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "But I think you want to tell someone, and I think you're tired of everyone being too afraid of you to listen." The silence stretched for so long, I thought he would ignore me entirely. Then, quietly, almost inaudibly, he spoke. "Her name was Elena. We were supposed to get married 5 years ago." I waited, not daring to breathe. I was driving us home from our engagement party. It was raining like today. I was on the phone, closing a deal because deals were always more important than anything else. His voice cracked. A truck ran a red light. I swerved. The passenger side took the impact. Richard's voice breaks and falters. My hand reached toward his shoulder but stopped inches away, hovering, not quite daring to touch him. "She died instantly. They told me she didn't suffer. Like that makes it any better." He finally turned to face me, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke me. I walked away with barely a scratch. "How's that for cosmic justice?" "It wasn't your fault." He laughed bitterly. "I was distracted. I was always distracted. She used to complain that I loved my work more than I loved her. And she was right. And now she's gone. And I'm still here, building my empire on top of her grave." Without thinking, I closed the distance between us and did something incredibly unprofessional, possibly career-ending, but absolutely. I needed to comfort him. Reaching out, I enveloped Richard in a hug. His body instantly tensed, reacting as if he'd been jolted by a cattle prod. I feared he would recoil, maybe even dismiss me on the spot. But then, with agonizing slowness, his arms encircled me, and he buried his face in the hollow of my shoulder. The tears didn't come. Richard Ashford simply didn't weep. Yet, his breathing was shallow and uneven, and his grip possessed a frantic desperation, as though I were the solitary anchor preventing him from being swallowed by the waves. We stood there, locked in that embrace, for what felt like an eternity but was likely a matter of mere minutes. And as quickly as it began, he pulled away, the walls of his carefully constructed fortress already rising once more. The vulnerability vanished, retreating behind layers of ice and polished steel. "That didn't happen," he stated gruffly, taking a step back and meticulously straightening his tie. "Richard, I mean it, Jade. This conversation, this moment, it didn't occur." He moved towards his desk, his movements sharp, economical, controlled. "You're dismissed for the day. I'll see you Monday." "You don't have to." "Monday, 6:45 a.m. Don't be late." The icy authority was back in his voice, but I detected a faint tremor in his hands as he shuffled papers. I left without protest, knowing that pushing him further would undo whatever progress we'd made. However, As I gathered my things from my desk, I registered something significant. The anonymous, threatening texts had ceased. 3 weeks of increasingly ominous warnings, and then silence. In the elevator, descending, I retrieved my phone and scrolled through the messages, rereading them with a newfound understanding. Asterisk, he destroys everyone who gets too close. Not because he's cruel, but because he's terrified of losing someone again. Asterisk, my phone vibrated. A new message. This time it was from Richard's number. Asterisk, thank you. Asterisk, 2 simple words. Yet they carried a weight that belied their brevity. A smile played on my lips as I stepped out into the rain, already anticipating and dreading Monday morning in equal measure. Somewhere between the humiliation, the frantic running, and the web of secrets, something had irrevocably shifted between us. Something dangerous. Something that felt terrifyingly like the genesis of falling in love with the wrong man at the worst possible time. From behind his office window, 42 stories above the city, Richard watched me leave, the photograph of Elena still positioned on his desk. For the first time in 5 years, gazing at it didn't ignite an urge to smash his fist through a wall. And that realization terrified him more than any high-stakes business deal ever could. Monday morning dawned with an unexpected twist. Richard wasn't waiting for me in his office, ready for our customary run. Instead, a note was taped to his door, written in his sharp, precise hand. Asterisk, meeting ran late. Take the day to catch up on correspondence. R. Asterisk, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Relief, certainly. My legs were still aching from last week's grueling workouts. But also disappointment, a vague sense of unease. I couldn't quite identify the emotion twisting in my gut as I settled at my desk and booted up my computer. The morning crawled by in a blur of emails and scheduling tasks. Around 11 o'clock, Vanessa Drake sashayed past my desk, her Chanel perfume announcing her presence before her voice did. So, the golden girl got stood up this morning. She leaned against my desk, feigning sympathy. Don't take it personally, sweetie. Richard always pulls back when things get too intimate. It's a pattern with him. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied coolly, pointedly not looking up from my screen. Of course you don't, she said, examining her immaculate manicure. Just like you don't know about Rebecca, his previous assistant who lasted 6 months before having a nervous breakdown, or Jennifer before her, who quit after 3 weeks. She paused, letting the information sink in. Or is there something work-related you need, Miss Drake? I finally met her gaze, and something in my expression made her smile falter. Just friendly advice. Richard Ashford doesn't do relationships. He accumulates casualties. And you, darling, are looking very casualty-shaped lately. She straightened up, smoothing her pencil skirt. But don't worry. Give it a few more weeks, and you'll be just another name on the list of people who couldn't handle him. She turned and walked away, leaving me staring at my computer screen, her words echoing in my head. How many assistants had Richard gone through, and what had driven them all away? My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number, the first in days. Asterisk, ask him about the NDA. Ask him what he made them all sign. Asterisk, a chill snaked its way down my spine. Before I could second-guess myself, I was pulling up the employment contract I'd signed 4 weeks earlier. I'd been so fixated on the salary that I'd barely skimmed the other clauses. Now I scrutinized every word. There it was, buried within the legal jargon on page 17. A non-disclosure agreement far more extensive than standard corporate confidentiality. Asterisk, this NDA covers any and all personal matters, private behaviors, or individual circumstances observed during employment. Asterisk, it was accompanied by a staggering penalty clause. $500,000 for any breach. What, exactly, didn't Richard want people talking about? I was still staring at the contract when the elevator doors dinged open, and Richard stepped out, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, and dark shadows painted the skin beneath his eyes, shadows that makeup couldn't quite conceal. My office, now. He didn't wait for a response. Striding past me, I followed, my stomach churning with anxiety. He closed the door behind us and leaned against his desk, arms crossed, the picture of controlled restraint. "I apologize for this morning," he said stiffly. "The meeting in Tokyo ran longer than expected." "Tokyo? You've been up all night. That's not your concern." "But there's no heat." In his words, only raw exhaustion. "I need you to clear my schedule for Thursday afternoon. All of it." "May I ask why?" His jaw tightened. "No, Richard. Mr. Ashford." He corrected sharply, and the correction stung more than it should. "In this office, it's Mr. Ashford. What happened Friday was an aberration. It won't happen again." An aberration. Anger flared hot in my chest. "You shared something real with me. You were human for 5 minutes, and now you're going to pretend it didn't happen?" "I'm not pretending anything. I'm maintaining appropriate professional boundaries." He moved behind his desk, using the furniture as a physical barrier between us. "Boundaries I should never have crossed. Why did all your previous assistants leave?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Rebecca, Jennifer, how many have there been?" His expression turned glacial. "Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? What I want to know is why they left. What happened to them?" "Nothing happened to them." Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "They left because they couldn't handle the pressure of this job. Because they were weak. Because they got attached." The last word hung in the air like an accusation. "Attached to you?" I repeated slowly. "I don't have time for this conversation." He turned towards his computer. "Get me the Henderson files." "No." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked up slowly, disbelief etched across his features. "Excuse me?" I said no. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'm not your puppet, Richard. I'm not going to pretend Friday didn't happen. I'm not going to ignore the fact that you're pushing me away because you're scared." "Scared?" He laughed, but the sound was harsh and mirthless. "You think you know me because I had one moment of weakness? You don't know anything, Jade. Then tell me. Stop hiding behind your walls and just be honest for once." "You want honesty?" He stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. "Fine. You scare the hell out of me. You walk into my life with your idealism, your defiance, and your infuriating inability to just do what you're told. And you make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again. Is that what you wanted to hear?" I could barely breathe. "Richard. I destroyed Elena because I couldn't focus on anything but work. I've destroyed every relationship I've ever had because all I know how to do is build empires and push people away." He moved around the desk, and now there was nothing between us but charged air. "So yes, you're right. I am scared because you're different, and different is dangerous. And I can't afford to care about someone again, only to watch them leave, or worse." "I'm not Elena," I whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now." His hand reached up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so tender it made my throat tighten. "They all say that, and then they realize what it means to be close to me. The scrutiny, the pressure, the fact that I'm fundamentally broken. And they run. Maybe they ran because you pushed them away before they had a chance to stay. We were standing so close. I could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand was still near my face, trembling slightly. "This is a mistake," he murmured, but he was leaning closer. "Probably," I breathed, tilting my face up. "I'm your boss. This violates every HR policy." "I know. You should leave right now. Transfer to another department. Find another job. Get as far away from me as possible." "I should," I agreed. Neither of us moved. The space between us evaporated as his lips crashed into mine. And it was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, hungry. 5 years of repressed emotion exploding between us. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I grabbed his lapels as though he might disappear if I let go. It was wrong. It was unprofessional. It was potentially career-ending for both of us. It was also the most right thing I'd felt in my entire life. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Richard rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he said roughly. "I know. I can't." He struggled with the words. "I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Richard. I'm asking you to try." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was something I hadn't seen before. Hope, fragile and terrifying. "Thursday afternoon," he said quietly. "I cleared my schedule because it's the anniversary of Elena's death. I go to her grave every year. I'd like you to come with me." The request was so vulnerable, so honest, that I felt tears prickling my eyes. "I'd be honored." He kissed me again, softer this time, and I tasted the salt of tears. His or mine, I wasn't sure. Outside the glass walls of his office, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa Drake watching us. Her face twisted with something that looked like fury. She turned and walked away quickly, and a small voice in my head whispered that we'd just made a powerful enemy. But wrapped in Richard's arms, his heart beating against mine, I couldn't bring myself to care. Some mistakes were worth making. Thursday arrived draped in gray clouds and drizzle, as if the sky itself knew where we were going. Richard picked me up at my apartment in his personal car. Not the company town car with a driver, but a sleek black Audi he drove himself. He was in jeans and a dark sweater, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. The man who commanded boardrooms with an iron fist now sat quietly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I reached over and placed my hand on his. He flinched slightly, then turned his palm up and interlaced our fingers. We didn't talk during the 40-minute drive to the cemetery in Westchester. What was there to say? I'm accompanying my boss, my boyfriend, my lover, we hadn't defined it. To visit his dead fiancé's grave. There's no etiquette book for this situation. The cemetery was beautiful in a melancholy way, with ancient trees and weathered headstones stretching across rolling hills. Richard parked and sat for a long moment, staring through the windshield. "You don't have to come with me to the grave," he finally said. "You can wait here if you want." "I'm not waiting in the car like some secret you're ashamed of." I squeezed his hand. "I'm here. Let me be here." He nodded stiffly and we got out. He retrieved a bouquet of white lilies from the back seat, her favorite flowers, I assumed, and led me down a winding path to a polished granite headstone. Elena Marie Hartwell, beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Her light still shines. Richard knelt and placed the flowers carefully at the base. I stood back, giving him space, watching as his lips moved in what might have been a prayer, an apology, or both. "I brought someone to meet you," he said aloud, his voice rough. "Her name is Jade. She's helping me remember how to be human again." Tears blurred my vision. I knelt beside him and placed my hand on his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," he continued, and now his voice broke. "I'm sorry for everything I did wrong. For all the times I chose work over you. For being on that goddamn phone." "Richard," I started, but he shook his head. "I need to say this." He took a shuddering breath. "I think I'm falling in love again, Elena, and I'm terrified. Terrified that I'll fail her the way I failed you. Terrified that loving me will destroy her. But she's stubborn and fearless, and she won't let me push her away, and I don't know what to do with that." He turned to look at me, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole my breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Jade, and I need you to understand what that means. It means I'll work too much. It means I'll be difficult and closed off and sometimes cruel, because I don't know how else to protect myself. It means there will be days I'll push you away because getting close to people terrifies me." He cupped my face with both hands. "But it also means I'll try for you. I'll try to be better." I kissed him there in front of Elena's grave, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. We were walking back to the car, his arm around my shoulders, when my phone rang. It was Patricia from HR, and her voice was strained. "Jade, I need you to come to the office immediately. There's been a situation. My stomach dropped. What kind of situation? I can't discuss it over the phone. Please just come now. And Jade, bring Mr. Ashford. Richard's expression darkened as I relayed the message. What the hell is going on? We found out 30 minutes later, sitting in Patricia's office across from her and the company's lead attorney, a severe woman named Margaret Cho, who looked like she ate nails for breakfast. An employee has filed a formal complaint, Margaret said without preamble, sliding a document across the desk, alleging that Mr. Ashford is engaged in an inappropriate relationship with his assistant, creating a hostile work environment and showing favoritism. My blood turned to ice. Richard's face became a mask of stone. Who filed this complaint? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. That information is confidential at this stage, Patricia said nervously. But the complaint includes evidence. Margaret opened a folder, and my heart stopped. Inside were photographs, Richard and me kissing in his office, printed in high definition. Someone had taken them through the glass walls. Someone had been watching, waiting. These were taken Monday, Margaret continued. The complainant alleges this relationship has been ongoing and that Miss Sullivan received preferential treatment, including a higher starting salary than previous assistants, involvement in high-level meetings. Enough! Richard's voice could cut glass. Miss Sullivan's salary and responsibilities are justified by her performance. She found a $340 million error in our novate projections within her first week. She's earned every opportunity I've given her. That may be true, Margaret said, but the optics are problematic. You're the CEO. She's your direct report. This is a textbook case of inappropriate workplace conduct. Then I'll resign, I said suddenly. Both Richard and the attorneys stared at me. If the issue is that we work together, I'll quit. Problem solved. Absolutely not, Richard snapped. You're not sacrificing your career because someone has an axe to grind. The issue isn't that simple, Patricia interjected. The complaint also alleges that Mr. Ashford has a pattern of inappropriate behavior with assistants, that several previous assistants left due to pressure to engage in relationships. That's a goddamn lie. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Every assistant who left did so of their own volition. I never pressured anyone into anything. Can you prove that? Margaret asked pointedly. Because the complainant claims to have testimony from at least 2 former assistants willing to support their allegations. The room spun. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was an attempt to destroy Richard's reputation, to paint him as a predator who abused his power. Vanessa, I breathed. Vanessa Drake filed this complaint, didn't she? Patricia and Margaret exchanged glances, which was all the confirmation I needed. She saw us Monday. I continued, thinking fast. She's been hostile toward me since day one. She's had her eye on becoming CFO, but Richard passed her over last year for Marcus Chin. This is revenge. Even if that's true, Margaret said, it doesn't change the facts. You two are in a relationship. You work together. That's a violation of company policy regardless of who reported it. Then change my position, I said firmly. Transfer me to another department, another division. Make it so I don't report directly to Richard. But don't force me out completely, and don't let them use this to destroy him. Richard looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Jade, you can't. Yes, I can, and I will. I turned to Margaret. What if I transferred to the legal department or investor relations somewhere? My skills would be useful, but where there's no direct reporting relationship. Margaret considered this, exchanging glances with Patricia. That could work. It would address the immediate conflict of interest, but it doesn't address the harassment allegations, Patricia said quietly. We need to interview the former assistants. If their stories corroborate the complaint. They won't, Richard said with absolute certainty. Because nothing inappropriate happened. But interview them. Do whatever you need to do. I won't have my name, or this company's reputation, destroyed by lies. The meeting ended with a plan. I'd be temporarily reassigned to the legal department while HR investigated. Richard and I were to have no contact outside of official business meetings with other people present. We weren't to be seen together socially. Essentially, we had to pretend the past 3 weeks didn't happen. In the parking garage afterward, Richard grabbed my hand before I could get to my car. "This is my fault," he said hoarsely. "I should have been more careful. I should have." "Stop." I pressed my finger to his lips. "We both made this choice. We both knew the risks. I won't let them force you out. I won't let Vanessa win. She won't win. We won't let her." I smiled, though my heart was breaking. "We just have to be smart, patient. We play by their rules until the investigation clears you, and then we figure out what comes next. And if it doesn't clear me, if those former assistants lie, they won't lie, because you didn't do what she's accusing you of." I cupped his face. "I know you, Richard. I've seen who you really are, and I'm not going anywhere." He kissed me desperately, like he was trying to memorize the taste of my lips. "I love you," he whispered against my mouth. "I should have said it at the cemetery. I love you, Jade Sullivan." "I love you, too," I whispered back, tears streaming down my face. "We'll get through this." But as I drove home alone, watching him disappear in my rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That Vanessa Drake had more planned than a simple harassment complaint. My phone vibrated with a text from that same unknown number. "Asterisk told you he destroys everyone close to him. You should have listened. Now you'll pay the price, too." Asterisk. I stared at the message, and suddenly I understood. The texts, the photographs, the perfectly timed complaint. This wasn't just about revenge on Richard. Someone wanted to destroy us both. My first week in the legal department felt like exile. I was tucked away on the 34th floor, surrounded by lawyers who treated me like I was radioactive. Everyone knew about the complaint. The whispers followed me through the hallways, eyes tracking my every move. I'd become the scandal du jour, the cautionary tale about what happens when you get too close to Richard Ashford. I hadn't seen him in 6 days. 6 excruciatingly long days of playing by HR's rules while Vanessa Drake paraded around the executive floor like she'd already won. But I hadn't been idle. Late at night in my apartment, I'd been doing research, digging into Vanessa's background, her career trajectory, her connections, and I'd found something interesting. A pattern of complaints she'd filed over the years against colleagues who stood in her way. 3 different people, all suddenly reassigned or forced out after she accused them of various improprieties. None of the complaints ever went anywhere, but the damage to their reputations was done. I was staring at my laptop screen, trying to connect the dots, when my apartment buzzer rang. It was nearly 10 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Hello, it's me. Let me up." Richard's voice through the intercom made my heart leap into my throat. I buzzed him in without thinking, then panic set in. We weren't supposed to have contact. If someone saw him here, he was at my door in minutes, looking like hell. His hair was disheveled, his tie was gone, and there was a desperate energy radiating off him that scared me. "You can't be here," I said, even as I pulled him inside. "If HR finds out." "I don't care." He grabbed me, kissing me hard enough to bruise. "I don't care anymore. 6 days without you. 6 days of pretending I don't need you. And I'm losing my mind. Richard, the investigation. It's a sham. They interviewed Rebecca and Jennifer today." He pulled back, his eyes wild. "Margaret called me an hour ago. Both of them denied everything. Said they left for personal reasons. That I never behaved inappropriately. Vanessa's entire case is falling apart." Hope bloomed in my chest. "That's good. It means she'll escalate. Margaret warned me that people like Vanessa don't go down quietly." He ran his hands through his hair. "I'm worried about you, Jade. The texts, the photos, the way she's been targeting you specifically. What if this isn't just about destroying my reputation? What if she wants to hurt you? I can handle Vanessa Drake. Can you? She's dangerous. She's calculating. And she clearly has resources. Someone took those photos. Someone's been sending those texts. She's not working alone." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Asterisk. "Enjoying your visit from Mr. Ashford? Smile for the camera." Asterisk. My blood ran cold. "Richard, we need to leave." Asterisk. "Now." "What? Why?" I showed him the text, and his face went pale. We rushed to my window, and there, across the street in a parked car, I saw the brief flash of a camera lens. Here's the rewritten content, significantly expanded and embellished as requested. They're watching me. I breathed, the words barely audible. A secret whispered into the charged atmosphere of Richard's opulent office. They've been watching this whole time, haven't they? Richard, his face a mask of controlled fury, was already barking orders into his phone. Marcus, I need you to trace a number. Immediately. And get security to Jade's address now. I want a full sweep of the premises. He rattled off the digits, his voice sharp and precise, the unmistakable sound of a man used to getting his way, but laced with a raw fear that made my stomach clench. He snapped the phone shut and turned, his gray eyes, usually so cold and calculating, now blazing with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Pack a bag, Jade. You're not staying here tonight. Richard, if I leave with you, it'll just give them more ammunition, fuel their twisted narrative. I argued, trying to inject a note of reason into the rapidly escalating situation. I don't care about the optics. His voice cracked, a fissure in his carefully constructed facade. Don't you understand? They're stalking you, Jade. This has gone way beyond corporate politics, beyond power plays and boardroom backstabbing. I am not leaving you here alone to face this. 20 minutes later, we were speeding through the city streets in Richard's sleek black car, a phalanx of dark SUVs filled with armed security trailing us like shadows. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I clutched my small overnight bag, its contents feeling woefully inadequate against the unknown threat looming over us. Marcus will have information on that number by morning, Richard said, his jaw tight, the muscle in his cheek ticking. And I'm calling an emergency board meeting. This charade ends tomorrow. I promise you. What are you going to do, Richard? What kind of plan are you cooking up in that brilliant, terrifying mind of yours? His gaze softened, a flicker of something akin to tenderness crossing his features. Whatever it takes to protect you, Jade. Whatever it takes. His penthouse in Tribeca was exactly what I expected. Minimalist, achingly expensive, and utterly impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city, but the stark, modern decor felt cold, sterile. Except for one thing. On his nightstand, bathed in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, sat a framed photograph of Elena, her smile frozen in time. He caught me looking at it, his expression clouding over with a familiar grief. I'm not ready to put it away yet, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. Is that okay? With you? Of course, it is, I replied, reaching out to take his hand, my fingers intertwining with his. She was a part of your life, Richard, a significant part. I would never ask you to erase that or pretend it didn't happen. He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair, his body trembling slightly. I don't deserve you, Jade. Not after everything. Yes, you do, I whispered fiercely, holding him tighter. You deserve happiness, Richard. We both do. We fell asleep on his massive leather couch, fully clothed, tangled in each other's arms like survivors clinging to a raft in a stormy sea. For a few precious hours, I let myself forget about Vanessa, the hidden cameras, the relentless investigations, the suffocating paranoia. It was just us, his heartbeat a steady rhythm against my ear, his arms a fortress around me, shielding me from the storm raging outside. Morning arrived with the jarring intrusion of Marcus's call at 6 a.m. Richard answered on speaker, his voice still thick with sleep. Boss, you need to hear this. That number, it's registered to a private investigation firm. I dug deeper, went down the rabbit hole. They were hired 6 weeks ago. Guess who the client is? Marcus paused, the silence hanging heavy in the air. Vanessa Drake and Robert Crane. My brain short-circuited. Robert Crane? The CEO of Novatech? The very same Robert Crane? The very same, Marcus confirmed grimly. Apparently, he and Vanessa have been involved romantically for the past year. It all started after Richard tanked the Novatech merger. I didn't tank it, Richard interrupted, his voice hardening. I negotiated favorable terms for Ashford Industries. Terms that were devastating for them. Favorable for us, devastating for them. Crane blamed you for Novateka's stock crash. He lost millions personally. This isn't just about Vanessa's ambition, boss. It's revenge, pure and simple. They've been planning this together, meticulously orchestrating every move. The pieces slammed into place with sickening clarity. The timing of Vanessa's complaint, the staged photographs, the carefully crafted texts designed to isolate me and drive me to the brink of madness. It was all a carefully constructed illusion, a house of cards built on lies and deceit. Do you have proof, Marcus? Concrete evidence we can use? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Better than proof, Jade. I have emails. Vanessa was sloppy, arrogant enough to use her company account to communicate with the PI firm. I've got everything. The plan to fabricate harassment claims, the detailed instructions to follow and photograph you both, even a discussion about planting false testimony from former assistants if the real ones didn't cooperate. Richard's expression was murderous, his eyes burning with a cold, controlled rage. Send everything to Margaret and the board now. Every single shred of evidence. I want them to see the depth of this betrayal. Already done, boss. But there's one more thing, Marcus said, his voice tinged with discomfort. The emails show they were planning something bigger for today. Something about final exposure and going to the media. I don't know exactly what, but my own phone rang, cutting him off. It was Patricia from HR, her voice high-pitched and frantic. Jade, thank God you answered. Don't come to the office. There are reporters swarming the building, Jade. Hundreds of them. Someone leaked a story to the press about Richard, about multiple assistants, about sexual harassment and abuse of power. It's everywhere. News sites, social media, cable news. Everywhere. My stomach plummeted. A cold, hard knot of dread forming in its pit. Richard snatched his own phone and pulled up a news site, his face grim. There it was, splashed across the screen in bold, unforgiving letters. Tech mogul Richard Ashford accused of pattern of sexual harassment. No! I breathed, the word a broken whisper. No, no, no. But Richard was smiling, a strange, almost unsettling smile playing on his lips. They just made a fatal mistake, he said calmly, his voice dangerously low. Marcus, send me everything. Every email, every receipt, every piece of evidence you have. I'm calling a press conference for this afternoon. We're going to fight fire with fire. Richard, are you sure about this? Going public is risky, boss. Incredibly risky. If this backfires. Marcus trailed off, his concern palpable. It won't backfire, Marcus, because I have something they don't. The truth. And Jade. He looked at me, and there was something fierce and protective in his eyes, a primal strength that sent a shiver down my spine. Get the PR team ready, Marcus. We're going nuclear. For hours later, I was standing beside Richard in a packed conference room, the air thick with tension and the blinding glare of flashing cameras. Journalists jostled for position, their faces hungry for a soundbite, a scandal, a story to feed the insatiable appetite of the 24-hour news cycle. My palms were slick with sweat, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I kept my chin up, forcing myself to meet the gaze of the assembled media. Richard stepped to the podium, his presence commanding, his posture radiating an aura of unwavering confidence. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice resonating with authority. I'm here to address the allegations that were published this morning. Allegations that are not only demonstrably false, but part of an orchestrated campaign to destroy my reputation and harm someone I care about deeply. He clicked a remote, and a large screen behind him flickered to life, displaying a series of emails and documents. These communications, obtained legally through our IT department, show a conspiracy between Vanessa Drake, a vice president at my company, and Robert Crane, CEO of Novatech Solutions, to fabricate harassment claims in retaliation for a business deal they found unfavorable. The room erupted in a cacophony of questions, but Richard held up his hand, silencing the clamor. They hired a private investigation firm to stalk and photograph me and my assistant, Jade Sullivan. They attempted to coerce former employees into providing false testimony, and when that failed, they leaked a fabricated story to the media, hoping to destroy our lives. He paused, letting his words sink in. I'm announcing that both civil and criminal charges are being filed against Ms. Drake and Mr. Crane for harassment, defamation, and corporate espionage. We will pursue this matter to the fullest extent of the law. A reporter shouted from the back of the room. But what about your relationship with Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Ashford? Is that true? Richard turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and I nodded, giving him my silent consent. This was it. The moment of truth, the moment we either sank or swam together. Yes, he said clearly, his voice ringing with conviction. Jade and I are in a relationship. A consensual relationship that began after weeks of working closely together. When we realized our feelings, we immediately reported it to HR and arranged for her transfer to the legal department to eliminate any potential conflict of interest. We followed every protocol, every guideline. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers tightening around mine. What we haven't done, and what we will never do, is let corporate conspiracy and malicious lies determine our future. The cameras went wild, the questions flying fast and furious, but Richard just stood there, holding my hand, facing them all down, his gaze unwavering. Later, after the lawyers had sorted through the legal fallout, after Vanessa and Crane had been arrested, after the media circus had finally begun to subside, we found ourselves back in Richard's penthouse, the city lights twinkling below us. The sun was setting over the Hudson River, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and gold. The beauty of the scene was a stark contrast to the ugliness we had just endured. Well, I said, leaning against his chest on the balcony, my voice laced with a mixture of relief and disbelief. That was certainly one way to go public with our relationship. He laughed, a genuine, unburdened laugh that warmed my heart. I'm so sorry you got dragged through all that, Jade. You didn't deserve any of this. I'm not sorry, I replied, turning to face him, my eyes meeting his. We survived it together, Richard, and I think we're stronger for it. I love you, he said, the words coming easily, naturally, without hesitation. I love you, Jade, and I'm not afraid anymore. Good, I said, smiling, because I'm not going anywhere, Richard Ashford. You're stuck with me. Promise? Promise? I whispered, and he kissed me. A slow, tender kiss that sealed our bond. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, I thought about how far we'd come. From that first humiliating boardroom encounter to this moment, standing together against the world, our love a beacon in the darkness. But there was still one more chapter to write, one more promise to make, one more hurdle to overcome. 6 months later, I was standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom, adjusting my dress for the third time. It was a simple navy sheath, elegant but understated, appropriate for a formal dinner with the board of directors. And yet, despite its simplicity, I still couldn't shake the feeling of unease, the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. I still couldn't believe I was nervous about tonight. You look beautiful, Richard said softly from the doorway, and I caught his reflection in the mirror. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that made his gray eyes look like molten silver. My heart still skipped a beat every time I saw him. Some things I suspected would never change. You're biased? I replied, but I was smiling, a genuine, radiant smile that reached my eyes. Completely and utterly biased. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. But also correct. Are you ready for this, Jade? Ready to face the wolves? As ready as I'll ever be to face your entire board of directors at a formal dinner after the year we've had. I quipped, but my voice trembled slightly. After the Vanessa Drake scandal broke, things moved with dizzying speed. Vanessa and Robert Crane both faced serious criminal charges. Conspiracy, corporate espionage, harassment. Vanessa, realizing the gravity of her situation, took a plea deal and resigned in disgrace, effectively ending her career. Crane, however, refused to go quietly, but his defiance was short-lived. He lost Novatech entirely when shareholders, enraged by his actions, forced him out. The media circus raged for a few weeks, but Richard's transparency and the overwhelming evidence of the conspiracy actually improved public opinion of both him and the company. As for me, my transfer to the legal department turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I discovered I loved contract law, loved the intellectual challenge of negotiating deals and finding creative solutions to complex problems. 3 months ago, Richard, acting on the unanimous recommendation of the board, promoted me to Associate General Counsel, a position I earned through sheer hard work and merit. No one could accuse him of favoritism when I'd helped secure 2 major acquisitions and saved the company millions in potential litigation. "They love you, you know," Richard said, reading my mind as he often did now, his fingers tracing the curve of my waist. "The board. After you restructured the Meridian deal, Harrison actually said you were the best hire I'd ever made. He said that because I found the loophole that saved him from a terrible earn-out provision." I retorted, but I couldn't suppress a smile. "He said it because it's true." Richard spun me around to face him, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "But I have something more important than a board dinner to discuss," he said, his voice suddenly serious. My stomach flipped, a wave of anticipation washing over me. There was something different in his voice, something weighted with meaning. "Okay," I managed to whisper, my heart pounding in my chest. He took a deep breath, his expression shifting, and suddenly he looked nervous. Richard Ashford, the man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, looked genuinely nervous. "I've been thinking about Elena lately," he began, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "Not in the way I used to, with guilt and pain, but with gratitude, I guess. Gratitude that I had that love once, even if I lost it, and gratitude that I was given a second chance at it." Tears pricked my eyes, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue, knowing that this was something he needed to say, something he needed to share. "You changed my life, Jade. You walked into my office 6 months ago, refused to be intimidated, and somehow saw past all my walls, all my defenses, to the broken man underneath. You made me want to be better, to be worthy of love again." He reached into his pocket, and my heart stopped completely. "I know it's fast, Jade. I know we've been through hell and back. But I also know that life is too short to waste time pretending we don't know exactly what we want." He dropped to one knee, the gesture both elegant and utterly vulnerable, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could barely process what was happening. "Jade Sullivan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the bravest, smartest, most infuriating, and most wonderful woman I've ever known. You challenge me. You ground me. You make me laugh when I forget how. You make me believe in second chances and new beginnings." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a stunning ring, a brilliant diamond surrounded by emeralds the exact color of my eyes. "Will you marry me, Jade?" "Yes." I gasped through tears, my voice barely audible. "Yes, Richard. Yes. Absolutely. Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled me into a kiss that felt like coming home. A kiss that spoke of love, of trust, of hope for the future. When we broke apart, we were both crying and laughing at the same time, our faces wet with tears of joy. "I love you," I whispered against his lips, my voice trembling with emotion. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," he murmured back, his eyes shining with an intensity that mirrored my own. "We can be terrified together." We arrived at the board dinner fashionably late, our hands clasped tightly together, our hearts beating in unison. And the moment we walked in, I knew something was different. The entire board was present, along with several key executives, including Marcus Chen, who was grinning like he knew a secret, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "What's going on, Richard?" I whispered, my anxiety returning. "What's all this?" But he just smiled mysteriously, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Harrison Blackwell, the board chairman, a man who had been a fixture at Ashford Industries for over 3 decades, stood and raised his glass, his face radiating warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the room, "before we begin tonight's agenda, I have an announcement of my own." A hush fell over the room, all eyes fixed on Harrison. "After 35 years in corporate leadership, I've decided to step down as chairman of Ashford Industries." A collective gasp swept through the room. Harrison had been chairman since before Richard even founded the company. He was an institution, a legend. His departure would mark the end of an era. However, Harrison continued, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "I'm pleased to announce my successor, someone who exemplifies the values this company was built on: innovation, integrity, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult." He paused, his gaze settling directly on me, his expression filled with admiration. "Jade Sullivan Ashford, well, soon to be Ashford, I'd like to offer you the position of vice chair of the board." I nearly dropped my champagne glass, the room spinning around me. "What?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Richard squeezed my hand reassuringly, his pride evident in his eyes. "They voted this afternoon, Jade. It was unanimous. They all believe in you." "But I've only been Associate General Counsel for 3 months," I protested, my mind reeling. "I don't have the experience, the qualifications." Before I could continue, another board member, Catherine Wu, a sharp, insightful woman with a reputation for cutting through the nonsense, spoke up. "You've demonstrated more strategic thinking and leadership potential in the last 3 months than some executives show in their entire careers, Jade. Your work on the Meridian acquisition alone proved you're ready for this level of responsibility. Plus," Marcus added with a grin, his eyes dancing with amusement, "someone needs to keep Richard in check, and you're the only one who can do it." The room erupted in laughter, the tension breaking like a dam. I looked at Richard, who was watching me with such love and pride that I felt like my heart might burst. "What do you say, Jade?" Harrison prompted, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. "Ready to help lead this company into the future?" I thought about that first day, walking into the boardroom terrified and determined, facing Richard's cruel dismissal, the humiliation that almost made me quit. I thought about every battle we'd fought, every wall we'd torn down, every obstacle we'd overcome. I thought about every moment that had led us to this point, to this extraordinary opportunity. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and met Harrison's gaze with unwavering resolve. "Yes," I replied, my voice strong and clear, resonating with confidence. "I'd be honored." The applause was thunderous, deafening, a wave of support that washed over me. Richard pulled me into his arms, whispering in my ear, "That's my girl, my fierce, brilliant, unstoppable girl." Later, after the dinner had wound down and we were driving home through the glittering Manhattan night, the city lights blurring around us, I kept staring at the ring on my finger, the emerald sparkling in the darkness, still not quite believing that this was real, that this was my life. "Are you happy, Jade?" Richard asked softly, his voice laced with concern. "Deliriously," I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder, "but also a little scared. Vice chair of the board at 28? What if I'm not ready? What if I fail?" "Then you'll get back up and try again," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "That's what you do, Jade. That's who you are." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a tender kiss against my knuckles. "Besides, you'll have me always, by your side, supporting you every step of the way. Promise?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Promise," he murmured back, his eyes filled with love. We pulled into the underground garage of our building, the familiar scent of gasoline and concrete a comforting presence. But before we got out of the car, Richard's phone buzzed, signaling an incoming email. He checked it and smiled, his expression softening. "What is it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Email from Rebecca, my former assistant," he said, his voice filled with affection. She heard about our engagement. He showed me the message, his eyes shining with warmth. Congratulations to you both, Rebecca had written. I always knew Richard needed someone who wouldn't put up with his nonsense. Jade, if you ever need advice on managing him, I have stories. But seriously, I'm so happy for you both. He's a good man, Jade, who deserved a second chance at happiness. Take care of each other, Rebecca. Tears blurred my vision again, a wave of emotion washing over me. That's beautiful, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. There's more, he said, scrolling down through the email chain. Jennifer sent one too, and Sarah, the assistant before Rebecca. They're all happy for us, Jade. They all know the truth. Because they know you're not the monster Vanessa tried to paint you as? I said softly, my heart swelling with love. I'm not perfect either, he reminded me, his voice tinged with self-deprecation. I'm still difficult, still too focused on work sometimes, still learning how to let people in, how to trust. I know, I said smiling, and I'm still stubborn and argumentative, and I'll never stop calling you out when you're being an arrogant ass. I'm counting on it, he said, kissing me gently. Come on, future Mrs. Ashford. Let's go home. As we rode the elevator up to our penthouse, the one where Elena's photo no longer sat alone on the nightstand, but shared space with pictures of us of our life together, I thought about how far we'd come, how a moment of humiliation in a boardroom had led to the greatest love of my life. Hey, I said suddenly, breaking the silence. Remember what you said to me that first day, Richard? When you asked for my insignificant name? Richard winced, his face contorting in a grimace. Don't remind me, Jade. I was an arrogant bastard. You were, I agreed, smiling. But you know what? If you'd been nice and accommodating, I probably would have quit after a week like everyone else. It was your cruelty that made me want to prove myself, that made me want to show you that I was more than just another assistant. So, you're saying my being an ass was actually a good thing? He asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I'm saying everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to, I replied, looping my arms around his neck as the elevator doors opened onto our floor. You needed someone who wouldn't back down, who wouldn't be intimidated, and I needed someone who would challenge me, who would push me to be extraordinary. We needed each other, Richard. We did, he agreed, lifting me into his arms and carrying me across the threshold, his eyes filled with tenderness. Practice for our wedding day, he claimed, his voice husky with emotion. That night, wrapped in his arms in the darkness of our bedroom, I whispered, Thank you, Richard. For what? He murmured, his breath warm against my skin. For being cruel enough to make me fight? For being broken enough to need fixing? For being brave enough to love again? I kissed his jaw, my fingers tracing the lines of his face. For being you, Richard. Just for being you. His arms tightened around me, holding me close. Thank you, Jade, he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing past the walls to the man underneath, for making me believe I deserved a second chance. We both deserved second chances. I murmured, sleep beginning to pull me under. And we're going to make the most of them. Every single day, he promised, his voice soft but firm. And as I drifted off to sleep, secure in the arms of the man who once humiliated me, and now loved me beyond measure, I smiled. Because the best love stories aren't the easy ones. They're the ones you fight for, the ones that transform you, the ones that begin with conflict and end with forever. Our story began with a cruel millionaire and his defiant new assistant, an unlikely pair who clashed from the moment they met. But it ends with two people who learned that sometimes the greatest love comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the person who challenges you the most is exactly the person you need. 2 years later, the wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family gathered for a garden ceremony upstate. The air was filled with the scent of roses and the sound of laughter. Richard cried when I walked down the aisle, his face overcome with emotion, and I pretended not to notice to spare his pride. Elena's sister, Sarah, was there, and she hugged me afterward, her eyes filled with tears. She would have loved you, Jade, she whispered. Thank you for making him whole again. We honeymooned in Italy, spending lazy days exploring ancient ruins, wandering through sun-drenched vineyards, and savoring delicious food. It was there, amidst the beauty and romance of Tuscany, that Richard finally learned to relax, to live in the moment instead of always planning the next move. I have a photo from that trip on my desk now. Richard laughing in a vineyard in Tuscany, wine-drunk and happy, his hair tousled by the breeze, looking nothing like the cold, ruthless CEO who once ruled his empire with an iron fist. Ashford Industries thrives under our combined leadership. Richard as CEO, me as vice chair. The company has expanded into new markets, launched innovative products, and maintained a reputation for both excellence and integrity. The board still jokes that I'm the only one who can keep Richard in check. And they're not wrong. We still fight, of course. Richard is still intense and demanding, and I'm still stubborn and unwilling to back down. But now our arguments end with passion instead of anger, with laughter instead of resentment. We've learned to respect each other's opinions, to value each other's strengths, and to forgive each other's weaknesses. Marcus Chun became CFO, a position he handles with brilliance and wit. He's become one of our closest friends, a confidant, and a trusted advisor. Patricia from HR retired, but not before telling me she knew from day one that Richard and I were perfect for each other. She just had to let us figure it out ourselves. And Vanessa Drake. She served 18 months for corporate espionage and lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her freedom. I should feel satisfaction at her downfall, a sense of justice served. But mostly, I just feel sad, a deep sense of sorrow that someone so talented, so ambitious, let ambition and revenge consume her, ultimately leading to her own destruction. This morning, I'm in my office, the corner office on the 42nd floor that Richard insisted I take, the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the breathtaking view of the city below. Richard appears in my doorway with 2 cups of coffee and that smile that still makes my heart skip, that smile that makes me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. Good morning, Mrs. Ashford, he says, his voice warm and loving, and I know I'll never get tired of hearing him say that name. Good morning, Mr. Ashford. I reply, smiling back at him. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? Can't a husband visit his wife? He asks, his eyes twinkling with mischief. He sets the coffee on my desk and perches on the edge, his presence filling the room with warmth and happiness. Besides, I have news. Good news or bad news? I ask, my curiosity piqued. Depends on your perspective, he grins. Remember that tech startup in Austin we've been watching? The one with the innovative AI technology? Yes, I reply, my mind racing. The one we've been trying to acquire for months? They just accepted our acquisition offer, he says, his voice filled with excitement. Richard, that's fantastic. I jump up to hug him, throwing my arms around his neck. That's the 3rd successful acquisition this quarter. You're on a roll. 4th, he corrects, his eyes twinkling. And it wouldn't have happened without your negotiating skills. You're brilliant, Jade. You know that, don't you? I learned from the best, I say, smiling. A cruel millionaire who once told me my opinions were mediocre. He winces, as he always does when I remind him of that first day. I was an idiot, Jade. A complete and utter idiot. You were. I agree, kissing him softly. But you're my idiot. I wouldn't change a single thing about how we started, Richard. Because look where it led us. Look where we are now. Here. He murmurs against my lips, his voice filled with love. It led us here to exactly where we're supposed to be. Through my office window, I can see the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly. A symbol of opportunity, of ambition, of dreams fulfilled. The same view Richard has from his office 1 floor up, a view we now share, side by side. 2 years ago, I stood in a boardroom in one of these buildings, humiliated and determined, with no idea that the man who had just crushed my ego would become my entire world. Life is funny that way, full of unexpected twists and turns, of serendipitous encounters and unlikely connections. The people who challenge us the most often end up being the ones we need the most. The relationships we have to fight for are the ones worth having. And sometimes the cruelest beginning leads to the most beautiful ending. What are you thinking about, Jade? Richard asks, following my gaze out the window, his arm around my waist, holding me close. About how far we've come, I say softly. About that terrified girl who almost quit after the first day. The girl who doubted herself, who felt insignificant and alone. She wasn't terrified, Jade. She was fierce, defiant, determined to prove herself. He pulls me closer, his voice filled with admiration. And she still is. That's what I love most about you, Jade Sullivan Ashford. You've never been afraid to stand up to me, to challenge me, to make me better. Someone had to keep your ego in check, I say smiling. And someone had to show me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself, that second chances exist if you're brave enough to take them. He kisses my forehead, his touch gentle and loving. Thank you for being that someone, Jade. Thank you for seeing the best in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number, breaking the spell of the moment. For just a second, a flicker of old anxiety flutters in my chest, a reminder of the fear and paranoia that once consumed me. But when I open it, I smile, relief washing over me. It's Rebecca. Just heard about the Austin deal. Congratulations, you two. You are unstoppable. I smile. Rebecca wants to have coffee. I tell Richard, my voice filled with warmth. She says she's launching her own consulting firm. Good for her, he says, his eyes twinkling with enthusiasm. Tell her I'll be her first client. I could use her expertise on the new market analysis. She always had a keen eye for detail. This is our life now. Building an empire together, supporting each other's dreams, turning former adversaries into allies. We're partners in every sense of the word. In business, in love, in life. As evening falls and we finally head home together, hand in hand, Richard takes my hand in the elevator. The same gesture he made that very first week, when everything was new and terrifying and uncertain. I have one more surprise for you, he says, his eyes filled with mischief, as we enter our penthouse. The place where we've built our life together. The place where we finally found peace and happiness. Richard, if you bought another company without telling me, I swear, I threaten jokingly, but my heart is filled with anticipation. He leads me to the living room, where a small wrapped box sits on the coffee table, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights. Open it, Jade. He urges, his eyes shining with excitement. Inside is a framed photograph. The one from our first board meeting. The one where I'm standing at the table, looking defiant and determined, while Richard glares at me from across the room, his expression cold and dismissive. Someone from PR must have taken it, capturing the moment that changed our lives forever. Below the photo is a small plaque, engraved with a simple but profound message. Asterisk where it all began. May we never forget that the best things in life are worth fighting for. Tears stream down my face as I laugh, overcome with emotion. You framed the moment you humiliated me? I ask, my voice choked with tears. I framed the moment you refused to back down. He says softly, his eyes filled with love. The moment I knew you were different, the moment I knew you were extraordinary, the moment I knew I was falling in love with you. He wraps his arms around me, holding me close, and I know, in that moment, that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Thank you, Richard. I whisper, my voice filled with gratitude. He frames the moment you refused to back down. The moment I knew you were different. He wraps his arms. He came up behind me, his presence a warmth against my back, a silent promise. That was the moment, wasn't it? The precise, unremarkable second my life irrevocably shifted, though I was blissfully, foolishly unaware at the time. I turned within the circle of his arms, drawing him close, and kissed him with everything I had. 2 years of shared laughter, quiet understanding, unwavering partnership, and a profound, overflowing gratitude poured into that single kiss. When we finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Smiles mirrored each other on our faces. "I love you, Richard Ashford," I whispered, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. My cruel millionaire who turned out to have the softest, most generous heart. He dipped his head, his eyes, usually so guarded, now shining with an open vulnerability. "And I love you, Jade Ashford," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. My defiant, headstrong assistant who somehow, inexplicably, became my everything. Beyond the panoramic windows, the city of Manhattan glittered, a sprawling tapestry of ambition and dreams, buzzing with endless possibility. But within these walls, within the haven we'd created together, we had built something far more precious, something neither of us had dared to imagine possible. A love that meticulously, painstakingly healed old wounds, scars that ran deeper than either of us cared to admit. A partnership forged in fire, tempered by challenges, that made us both infinitely stronger, more resilient, more whole. A future stretched before us, brighter and more promising than any past we had known. And somewhere, in a place beyond my reach but not beyond my thoughts, I liked to imagine Elena was smiling, finally at peace. She had known, hadn't she? She had sensed it that very first day in Richard's intimidating office. She understood what I had eventually learned, through a series of missteps and unexpected triumphs. Sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail for love. Sometimes you have to stand up, unwavering, to the very person who terrifies you most. Sometimes you have to risk absolutely everything, gamble it all on something that feels precarious, uncertain, something that might very well crumble before your eyes. But when it doesn't crumble, when you actually find that rare, extraordinary person who challenges you to your core, who cherishes you, flaws and all, who makes you yearn to be a better version of yourself while simultaneously loving you exactly as you are in this imperfect moment, well, then it's worth every single battle, every agonizing doubt, every sleepless night. Richard had been right about one thing, that much was undeniable. I did change his life. I cracked open the shell he had so carefully constructed around himself. But what he perhaps didn't fully grasp, not yet, was the magnitude of how irrevocably he had altered mine. He taught me that strength manifests in a multitude of forms, that vulnerability is not a weakness but a profound act of courage, that the true, authentic person hidden beneath layers of armor is always, without exception, worth discovering. And I, in turn, hopefully taught him that he was unequivocally worthy of love, that the shadows of his past did not have the power to dictate his future, that opening your heart again after experiencing profound loss is, perhaps, the bravest, most audacious thing a person can do. Together, we learned, slowly and deliberately, that sometimes the most breathtakingly beautiful love stories emerge from the most unlikely, even the most volatile of beginnings. A sterile boardroom, a calculated humiliation, a fierce refusal to back down in the face of impossible odds, and a seemingly cruel millionaire who unwittingly met his match in the form of an outspoken assistant brave enough, or perhaps stubborn enough, to stand up to him. This is our story, our imperfect, messy, hard-won, absolutely irrevocably perfect love story. And it's not even close to being over. In fact, I think it's only just beginning.